It's summer here in Walla Walla, and one of our favorite pastimes is roller skating. Today's date for the Walla Walla Gazette newspaper is July 13th, 1895. Walla Walla hunters lost. Without money to purchase necessity, killed a steer. Mr. J. H. Marshall, the secretary of the Schwabacker Company, received the following message Friday from Thomas Eastman, who, with H.A. Gardner and Guy Turner, is on a hunting excursion in the Powder River Mountains. Medical Springs, Oregon, July 10th. J. H. Marshall. Camp is busted, out of funds. Send $20 money order to Carson, P.O. Box, Union County, Oregon, immediately. We have had a very pleasant trip thus far. Game capture to date, 1 badger killed by dogs. 1 chicken, tame, by Guy Turner, 1 2-year-old steer by Gardner, and a 6-pound trout by myself. Gardner thinks that he is likely to get out of touch with political events, so he wants some papers. Send him an almanac so he can keep in touch with the moon and stars also. If he hadn't touched the steer, we would not now be busted. There is said to be a white-faced bear in the hills about 6 miles from here. Gardner thinks he wants him and is collecting all the dogs in and the country to go in pursuit. If he were not white in the face already, we think the bear would grow pale when he sees Gardner coming. Yours in great want, Thomas Eastman. However, Mr. Marshall says he thinks it's not the steer that busted them, but that they have been roped into a poker game with some of the backwoods sharpers in the mountains. Social observations. Mrs. E.S. Isaacs went to Dayton Wednesday to visit friends. Frank Sharpstein visited Frenchtown Monday on legal business. Joseph Lyons of Pat Lyons Extraction furnished some excitement to the people of Lower Main Street Thursday evening by his fast driving. One of the bridles had slipped off one of his horses, and he had to let him go. Our friend, P. Lytle, brought us a box of cherry currants Wednesday, which we exhibited as long as we could keep our hands off them. They were as large as wild cherries and of an exceptionally fine flavor. Mr. Abraham Smith has been setting up the cigars in honor of the new smoker at his house. Mr. Smith promises his friends that he will not name the little boy John. Mr. Harry Minor and Miss Myrtle Bender were united in marriage at the residence of the bride's mother by Reverend Father Samden Tuesday evening. A party of friends witnessed the ceremony. Mr. and Mrs. John Alheit will have one of the neatest and most convenient homes in the city when the structure which is being erected on their property, corner of Birch and 2nd Streets, is completed. The 2-year-old child of W.H. Burney took some fly poison Monday and was made very ill, and a medic saved its life. On Tuesday evening, July 23rd, Frohman's Comedy Company will present the charming comedy entitled Jane at the new Hopper House. Mark Twain will start on a reading and talking tour around the world, beginning Ohio July 16th, coming west to the Pacific coast and continuing his long journey to India, South Africa, and England. Spokane is included in the cities where he will appear before an audience. Manager Fuller of the Opera House should secure him for Walla Walla. Shooting in Walla Walla. Some excitement was occasioned Tuesday afternoon on the central part of the city by the accidental shooting of Joe Merchant, a clerk of the Schwabacker Company, by Sheriff Ellingsworth. The officer had arrested a man who was wanted for cattle stealing in Umatilla County in front of Nye and Spencer's harness shop. Just as he started down the street to the jail, the fellow started to run. The sheriff pursued. In front of Schwabacker Co.'s place, the officer pulled his gun and fired at the feet of the fugitive. A number of men were standing around. The ball passed through the shoe of Joe Merchant and then glanced up from the sidewalk. The chase was continued out 3rd Street and down China Alley. As the fugitive turned to go through a saloon to Main Street, he was stopped by F.W. Schultz and William Smith, bystanders. These gentlemen were the only citizens who had responded to the demands of the sheriff to "stop that man." 2 other shots were fired by the sheriff, but they were directed into the ground and did no harm. The wounded man, Mr. Merchant, was taken to McAuliffe's drugstore. It was found that he was suffering from a flesh wound in the heel. At the time of going to press, he was recovering rapidly. It develops that Sheriff Ellingsworth had received a message from Milton Tuesday morning requesting him to arrest one Ben Bowers, a young man wearing goatskin chaps. Bowers was wanted for cattle stealing. Along in the day, a person answering that description sold Murray and Chatton, butchers on 1st Street, 5 head of cattle, and then put his horse up at the Cayuse stable. He then went to Nye and Spencer's and left his gaudy chaps for repairs. The sheriff, having satisfied as to the identity of his man, set a watch for him, meeting him when he returned to the harness shop for his cowboy apparel. On Wednesday, Bowers was taken to Pendleton by the sheriff of Umatilla County, where he will be arraigned for hearing. L. Berry, a Milton stock dealer, says that the cattle were stolen from William Wynn of Coos Creek, Emery Selling of near Weston, George Edwards, and Dave Woodward. Bowers, he says, has been stopping around Milton for some time and never seemed to do anything. Bowers, it is supposed, had a partner who sold a beef to Murray and Chatton, cut in quarters with the hide on. Mr. Murray, who made the purchase, thought the case a suspicious one and reported the matter to the sheriff. Horses will survive wheels. 37,000 pairs of toe weights are said to have been sold by one firm alone since February 5th. This means somewhere from 15,000 to 20,000 pounds of metal that the trotters and pacers of 1895 will pack around on their feet. And if an estimate could be made of all the metal in use for gaiting our fast horses, the figures would be somewhat startling indeed. Now that sounds as though the bicycle electrical appliances had not altogether supplanted horseflesh. There are sentiments as well as utilitarian reasons for the preservation of the horse. The boy, who begins by driving a goat to a tiny carriage, quickly becomes ambitious to control a more highly developed animal, one more responsive to intelligent touch. And he is not satisfied until he has a horse. Were there anything higher, he would go higher, but as there is not, he seeks to command the highest type of the horse. How gratifying is his neigh of welcome! How proud of him you are when you stroke his glossy neck and feel the breath of his thin nostrils, and how he lifts you above the dull things of the earth when he struggles to place yon ahead of all competitors. He is not a mere machine, but a responsive being and a faithful companion. It requires skill to control him, but this constitutes the witching art of which the poets sang. Those who have the means to indulge in pleasure horses will continue to do so. Human nature, as we find it after thousands of years of development, cannot be changed in a night. There is a vast difference between the dogs east of the Rocky Mountains and those west of it. Those in the east are the miscellaneous product of indiscriminate breeding. It costs too much to carry that kind of brute to the west. Hence one sees here only the better class of purebred, desirable animals. From one small local advertisement in the Gazette, Mr. D.M. Sloan says that he sold all his Mastiff pups. That shows that advertisements in this paper do pay. College Place crackers. Rip Van Winkle never would have slept 20 years if he had been in the neighborhood of College Place on the night of the 4th. At midnight sharp, the firing of anvils began, followed by the vigorous ringing of the college bell and blowing of horns, and for about 2 hours night would have been hideous had we not remembered what fun the boys were having, for of course it was the old story of boys and a racket. Most of the town was off early for the picnic grounds in Mr. Custer's Pleasant Grove, about 3 miles away. Here swings had been prepared, croquet grounds were inviting to use, and all things were in readiness for a pleasant time, while the numerous boxes and baskets ranged on the long table caused a feeling of contentment to steal over the assembly. Good meals at all hours for only 15 cents at the German restaurant, 3rd Street between Main and Alder. Farmers, it will not pay to bring a lunch to town when you can get a good hot meal so cheap. A midnight fire. Wednesday morning about 1 o'clock, the store building and grocery stock belonging to John Anderson was consumed by fire. Mr. Anderson estimates his loss at $2,500, insurance on goods $1,000, and on building $500. He intends to rebuild and to restock as soon as his losses are adjusted. The store is in the eastern end of the city, a mile from the engine house, and it was nearly consumed before it was reached by the fire department. It was with some difficulty that the adjoining property was saved, as the heat from the frame building was so intense and the cinders flew furiously. A city hydrant near the building to which a hose was attached gave out in about 2 minutes, and there would not have been a sufficient supply of water had it not for the engineer wisely dropping the feed in a reservoir in front of the smitten property. The reservoir is supplied by a spring brook. This fire impressed all witnesses that there are parts of the city without adequate fire protection. This is the second time the Park Street grocery has been burned out since its establishment. A little over a year ago it was destroyed. There are evidence that the place was burglarized and then fired to cover up the tracks, for a sack of sugar was found a short distance in the rear of the building. At Athena on Monday, August Sigmund and John Gergen, butchers, were killing a steer. Sigmund shot the animal, but the rifle bullet struck its horns and glanced and entered the leg of Gergen, inflicting a serious wound. Some of the antelope farmers say that there is a band of mules killing calves and young colts on the antelope range. A mule will, it is said, take a calf between his teeth and shake it to death. A petition to the County Court of Gilliam has been signed by many farmers, sheepmen, and merchants asking for a $1 bounty on every coyote killed. The coyotes are becoming more troublesome every year, and besides killing sheep, calves, and chickens, have begun to kill young pigs by the wholesale.